Welcome to video number 11 for Ctrl Shift Enter, Mastering Excel Array Formulas. Hey, I'm in the Workbook Array Formula DVD book. Start on the sheet topics. Now, in the last couple of videos, we were talking about functions that can handle array calculations without Ctrl Shift Enter. We looked at SUMPRODUCT and lookup. In this video, we want to look at aggregate and index and one more example of lookup and SUMPRODUCT. But together, these functions are amazing because they can do some array calculations without Ctrl Shift Enter. I'm going to click on my 11 link, jump to sheet number 11. And as I have been doing in the last few videos, here are the summarization of the points we've covered in the first 10 videos. Again, we're collecting our list of nuts and bolts and elements of how array formulas work in the first 14 videos. And then later, the last 10 or so videos, we'll use all those different elements to do amazing array calculations. All right, here's a list of the function arguments that can do array calculations. Array argument in the aggregate, array argument in the index, lookup vector and result vector in the lookup, and then, of course, array 1, array 2 in the sum product. Let's just do one last sum product example. We have budgeted and actual. And I don't want a helper column. I just want to see the total savings. So I simply say sum product. I take budgeted minus actual. That'll give me a positive number when I have spent less than was budgeted, and the sum product will add 250. The advantage to sum product is that over sum, for example, is that you don't have to use Ctrl Shift Enter. That is from implicit intersection. Of course, I would Ctrl Shift Enter if I was using the sum. You can see those curly brackets. All right, so sum product, absolutely amazing. And lookup, our last video, we did some lookup examples. And in our last video, we talked about looking up the last item. In fact, I'd like to go back and click on sheet number 10 and go back and look at example 6 in video 10. We looked up the last item in the column with mixed data. And so we used this construction, 1 divided by, and then in parentheses, whatever our condition was. Our condition was not empty. Now let's use that same idea here, but here's the deal. We want to look up the last city. This is a transactional data set. So for Puyallup, I need to retrieve the customer and the sale for the last entry, which should be PCC and 9,036. If I'm looking up Seattle, it would be FW and 10,761. I'm going to use lookup, and we're going to use the same idea. Some big number, 2 in this case, that's the lookup. Remember, lookup does approximate match by default. So if you give a lookup value that's bigger than any number in the column, it'll get the last one. All right, and so our trick was in the lookup vector, we did 1 divided by our condition. And our condition is, please look through all of the cities, F4, anytime that is equal to our criteria. Now, when we copy this way, we need it locked on the column. But when we copy the formula down, we do not want it locked. So I'm going to hit the F4 1, 2, 3 times. Lock the column, but not the row. Now, that's going to give me a bunch of trues and falses, right? F9. We need to convert those to numbers. And the reason we're using division instead of double negative or multiplying is because the division, and I'm going to Control Z here, click on that, that division will give us F9 ones for true, because true divided by, or 1 divided by true is 1, but 1 divided by false, which is a 0, gives us divide by 0. It's a way of eliminating all of the other elements except for only the ones that are Puyallup. Now, when 2 is looking up number, because it's bigger than any of the numbers here, it gets the last one. Control Z. Again, if we had used something and converted falses to zeros, that would mess up our ability to find the last one. Comma. Because if there were zeros, it would always just take the last one in the entry, not the last one, which met our criteria. All right, and our result vector, I'm highlighting here. Now we have to think about this. When I'm copying down, I need it locked on this column. But when I move over to the sales, I need it to move relatively. So I'm going to lock F4, only the row reference, but not the column. And there we have it. Now, the cool thing about this is that I can Control Enter. simply copy it over, and I'm going to point to the smart tag and say fill without formatting, and copy it down. I did not have to use Ctrl Shift Enter. I'm checking the last one. It looks like it worked perfectly. QFC 70234. That is the last number for the city of Sumner. Now, you could use this construction here. Match with a 2, and then the same exact idea. Again, leaving the last argument of match off to do approximate match. But you have to use Ctrl Shift Enter here. So Ctrl Shift and Enter. If I just Control Enter, I get a value error. Why? Because the lookup array argument inside a match is not programmed to handle array calculations. So Ctrl Shift Enter, you can see the curly brackets up there. Whereas we're talking about arguments here, that argument flat out can make array calculations without Ctrl Shift Enter. Now, I did go ahead and time these. If you look over in the last criterion timing workbook, Control O. In the timing formulas folder, it comes on the DVD. And I basically got a tie when I timed all these. So I got, there's the index. And it looks like, whoa, I got 100,000 rows here. So, and the lookup, and they were virtually a tie when I timed them. Now, again, as we've mentioned a number of times already, these are the results I got. You definitely want to, if you're concerned with calculation time, you got to time your own. And Excel MVP Charles Williams has an amazing website and free code. You just download it. It tells you how to download the VBA code and add a timer like this, and there is the code. All right, I'm going to close this workbook. So in essence, we got the time. So I prefer this one because I don't have to use Control Shift Enter. All right, now we SUMPRODUCT lookup. Now let's talk about index. Now we're going to start off. We have another example later in a later video, video number 22, example 6 with the index. But got to go back to video number 4. We had a data set, code, left, right, and quantity. And we, in essence, wanted to do a 2-value lookup. So in any intersecting cell, I need to be looking up this and return the quantity. And back in that video, we saw a bunch of other options for this. A helper column was a great option, and I think we looked at dget too. But here, if you really want this formula here, notice what did we just talk about with match? That lookup array argument cannot handle array calculations without Control Shift Enter, right? So originally up here I did Control Shift Enter. Now if you want to avoid that, we can use the index function to trick this formula. Now we talked about in video 1 about index and how amazing index is. Index can do one-way lookup, it can do two-way lookup, and it can look up a whole entire column. So we talked about index in video 1. How if I highlight 1, 2, 3, that's the array of values I'm looking up, comma. If I say I want this whole column here, which means I want every single row, I simply leave that row argument empty. And now because I have 1, 2, 3 columns, I'm just going to put a 2 here just to illustrate that because the row number argument is now empty, index is programmed to retrieve all of the rows. So when I highlight this and hit the F9, it returns an array of values. Now, here's the thing. We're going to trick our formula over here. Since in the lookup array, and to remind you how we did this formula, we're looking up a quantity. We needed to match two things. So we took this code and left, right with the right cell references, joined with the character between them. And then because we had two columns and we wanted one column, we simply joined. We took the code column and then the left, right column and created one single column. So watch this. I'm going to highlight just that part. I could just click on the array and hit the F9 key. We talked about array syntax. Curly brackets house the array. And notice it's semicolon, semicolon, semicolon. That means this is one single column. Got it? So it's a single column. We've seen this a few times where we create helper columns inside our formula. Well, if Ctrl Shift Enter is a problem for whatever reason, you don't want to do Ctrl Shift Enter, someone else is using it and they always mess it up, you can simply take that helper column and wrap it inside the index. Now, the argument in index that handles array calculations without Ctrl Shift Enter is that. Now, this is really kind of cheating because what we've done is all we did is if we come to the end of that join operation array calculation, there's the array. I'm going to type a comma. And guess what? I'm going to close parentheses here on my index. Now, my cursor's flashing because now the lookup array, if I click that and highlight it, all I did was to put that array calculation. Now I'm going to click inside the index right there, and you can see now it's the array. With a blank, that index now will return that whole column to the match lookup array, and it will no longer require Ctrl Shift Enter. Let's just click on this and hit F9, Control Z. Now, there is one slight drawback to this, right? We've added an extra function, which means it's going to take a little bit longer to calculate, but no problem. If your goal is to not have to do Ctrl Shift Enter, this will work. You ready? Control Enter. I don't see any curly brackets up there. Just to compare contrast over here, you see the curly brackets because we had to use it. But now when I click in G73, there they are. We use the index to deliver a column to the match. Now I don't have to use Ctrl Shift Enter. I'm going to copy this over and down. And I can click in the last one and see, sure enough, it is working. So that's a pretty tricky one there. Now, again, it is an extra argument that you don't need, because using Ctrl Shift Enter, if you could figure out how to do that and not have a problem with it, then you wouldn't have to use that other index. But there's an example of the array argument in index. We'll have another example in video 22. All right. Now, let's talk about the aggregate function. We saw back in video 1 an aggregate calculation only to use the aspect of the aggregate that helped us avoid errors. Now we're going to see an array calculation. Now, the aggregate. So the aggregate has a number of arguments. The very first argument is similar to the subtotal function, except for there's a bunch of extra functions here. And functions 14 to 19 all can handle array calculations without using Ctrl Shift Enter. Now, notice 15, the small function. So I'm going to set this problem up, and then we're going to use a small function and then see how to use aggregate to avoid it. Here we have a template, and these are racers that racing, and we always use the same template and retype in the numbers here. And we just want to always see the 3 fastest times for each one of our racers. So I know that I can use the small function to get the first, second, and third smallest value. And since I have a condition, I'm not trying to use the small on all the values. I just want the ones for Caden. I can put an if function inside of small. So small. And then I say if. By the way, you know, we talked about earlier how when SUMPRODUCT and index say array, and then that helps us remember that it doesn't involve Ctrl Shift Enter. This one, it's called array, but it still requires Ctrl Shift Enter. We'll try it to prove it to ourselves. All right, so we're going to use the if. I want to say if anything in this range right here, F4, is equal to that criteria. Now, when I copy the formula this way, I need it locked down on column E. But when I copy the formula down, I need the dancing ants to move relatively. So I'm going to hit the F4 1, 2, 3 times. Lock the column, but not the row. If anything in there is equal to Hayden, then please give me the times. F4. I'm going to not put anything for the false. It'll automatically put the word, the logical value false there. Close parentheses. If I click on this array here and hit the F9, you can see now I have delivered to the small just the numbers for Caden. Control Z. Now, that's the array, comma, K, this number right here. So for this column, I need the 1, but when I move over, I need it to move to the 2. So I'm going to lock it F4 1, 2 times, lock the row, but not the column. Close parentheses. This requires Ctrl Shift Enter. If you hit Enter and copy it over, it's just giving me implicit intersection here. Those are not the correct values. So I simply can Control Shift and Enter. And now I get the correct values. Now I can copy it over and down and so forth. All of the writers, we have the 3 fastest times. You can see our mixed cell references work there. So if I were to change any of these for the next racing session, these would automatically update. So if I change this to 47.15, so then automatically that updates. Now, this is small with a condition. We can simply use aggregate because we have this first argument, and we can select small. So aggregate can do large, small, percentile, quartile, all sorts of amazing functions. But I'm going to select 15, comma, and this argument also is very important. We want to ignore error values, so a 6. And then here's this great argument. It says array, and that can handle array calculations. Well, what numbers do we want? We really want all of these, and I'm going to hit F4. And I'm going to divide by our condition. Highlight F4 equals this one and lock the column but not the row. And we could take a look at this. Now this, of course, will give us trues and falses. And we know from our couple examples, this video and last video, that when you have division, that will turn to divide by 0 error. And the true will be whatever the number is divided by 1. So it'll give me the number, Control Z. If I highlight this array and hit the F9 key, boom. We have, just as with the small and if, isolated just the values we want for with the criteria here. But notice it's divide by 0 down there. It was false. But that 6 will just flat out help us ignore those divide by zeros. Control Z. And again, the other thing that this helps with is because we're doing a small calculation. If I were to do some other calculation here, and instead of divide by 0, we had the 0 there, then the 0 would show up as the small. So that's why that divide by 0 is important. Control Z. All right, now we come over here. We're reading our argument, comma K. Click on the 1, F4, lock the row, but not the column. Control Enter. I don't see any curly brackets up there. Absolutely beautiful. Over and down. Aggregate is just amazing. We will see later some great uses for the aggregate function where we have array formulas that extract data. All right, so down here at the bottom, there's a little bit more detail about the aggregate. And also, I have some truly epic videos at YouTube. Again, this video is about all the array formula stuff. But SUMPRODUCT, lookup, index match, and aggregate have all sorts of non-array formula uses that are amazing. And so any of those videos, if you want to go and follow the link or search for the title at YouTube, you can do that. So we saw aggregate. That amazing array argument can handle array calculations without Control Shift Enter. The index, the array argument can handle array calculations without Control Shift Enter. The lookup vector and also the result vector can handle array calculations without Control Shift Enter. And the ever amazing, often used array argument in SUMPRODUCT can handle array calculations without Control Shift Enter. All right, in our next video, video number 12, we'll actually talk about a few functions that have arguments that will never calculate array calculations. All right, we'll see you next video.